wants to invest in a US company and take a cornerstone shareholding in order to get significant technology transfer, these matters are not straightforward. The regulatory environment and just the general political climate is often extremely hostile. So from my point of view, when you hear people using the language of trust, it's very important for us to understand what this means. That where you can allow a business climate to open up, where technology transfer and cross-investment can genuinely occur to the mutual benefit of both parties, then I think some of the solutions this conference has spoken about are achievable. But don't underestimate the political parameters and prejudices that still exist. And certainly some of the developing world are quite suspicious about the extent to which the developed world and its both corporate and public policy environment and regulatory environment will let this cross-flow occur. So there are many political discussions, and it's my own view that unless there is some very clear signalling, both formally and informally in this sort of area, that there will be, remain suspicion as we move toward trying to get negotiation tools into this document.
What kind of signals? What could make the difference?
You know, it's very hard to re-establish good faith. I mean, if you came with me to Asia today and we started talking about subsidy sectors in the energy sector, and that, you know, we wanted to create genuine markets, they would immediately say, well, if the developed world wants to assist the developing world, they must take their subsidies out of the system. And this is at a time where the economic crisis is at its height, and the West is relying very much on the East's savings, and yet both Europe and the US have just recently slapped on agricultural tariffs which are excluding the developed world's trade in participating even at the market levels they were at 6 months ago. If you go to the developed world today, a lot of their economic activity has been set back, not because volume is not required, but because actions from government, and I guess this business of talking out of both sides of your mouth, in my opinion, is still a major political risk over the next 6 months. And action in the end speaks louder than words. And I think there are some sectors where, of course, we need the US to come in, and that's an important imperative. But don't expect the developing world to always have less than is fair if we're genuinely committed to the concepts of climate justice and a sustainable agreement that will take us forward.
Stephen?
If I could, I'd like to give an example of how you combine creating the circumstances of despair, leadership, and then the signals that are necessary to do this. And that this is a true story, actually happened, well documented. So in 1990, public pressure from consumers and leadership by companies had gotten 5 companies at least, AT&T, Motorola, Nortel, Seiko Epson, and Digital Equipment Corporation, to declare that they would stop using CFC solvents. That same circumstance would occur if you put a cap that was low enough that it threatened the very production of a company. Those companies, having declared their goal to their stockholders and their customers, realized they did not have the assets or the skills or the market clout to change the way that they were supplied. So they formed an organization with the help of the US EPA, so was Japan, Canada, United States, and Europe in the first membership, and the entire purpose was to collaborate on new technology so that they wouldn't have to buy this chemical ever again. And then they got forgiveness, an exemption from antitrust in the United States as a public purpose organization on the condition that they would disclose all technology that they discovered. So 5 companies became 10, used their money to solve their own problems, and then as a condition of collaboration, disclosed the technology worldwide in a series of handbooks on every detail of every use of those solvents over time. So an additional bonus was that team developed a patented technology, no clean soldering, which now dominates all of electronic manufacture everywhere in the world. And when they finished the development, they donated it to public domain.
Wow.
No problem. So if you create the circumstance of despair, your government helps them with antitrust, you're harsh on the conditions of forgiving antitrust, you get people to agree in advance to disclose technology, they're not sure exactly what it'll be, They can become enthusiastic advocates of technology transfer and solve the problem. And they're proud of what they've done. They've written it up as leadership and the like, and they attracted better employees because they're ahead of the game. So why not create the same circumstances over on climate protection?
I'm not sure I quite advocate creating more despair, but I think I see what you mean. No, it's a very encouraging thought. We have a very patient gentleman here.
Geir Volseder from Oslo. You raised systemic risk, because that's what we're looking at. We're talking about a carbon market, possibly raising tens of billions, hundreds of billions, possibly trillions of dollars. Even if I had the capital, put my business hat on, and I look at in not only the business landscape, but the political landscape. I'm looking at technology to reduce my footprint because of the capital is available, but I require $40, $50, or $60 a ton CO2 to make it worthwhile. When I look at what's happening with tariff coming in as economies collapse, the propensity to relax the cap in certain regions, meaning collapsing the carbon price, that is probably my greatest fear as a businessman trying to make money out of this market, because I deem the political risk greater than the market risk. Because when push comes to shove, you're on a 4-year election cycle. In order to stay in, how many have the courage to stick with the cap when people are getting laid off? And to get all the countries of the world to address that particular problem, including subsidies and all the other things, all this links into faith in the market. And how do you think that we can link a cap with all the other systemic risks that are involved to create confidence that we will invest?
Go on, who wants to have a go at that? Leif?
All right. Now, you are clearly pointing to the main point here, namely that if you create a system, you have to create it so that it's predictable and reliable. And these systems are difficult to create like that. Take the example from the United States cap and trade system on the table, which has a very beautiful development up to 2050. Now that would, if the investors really believed that the United States would have that trajectory up till 2050, it would be the best bill you ever saw on earth. But is the United States, through their process internally, able to create that trust in that profile? Because if they do, the investors will immediately take that into consideration right now. They will see a price profile going like that, and they will do their own calculations. If they don't, it becomes a difficult process, because up front that bill doesn't have very much scarcity. It has scarcity at the end. And if you don't get it up front by believing in it, well, it doesn't work. So the remaining part in the United States is to have it really believe, and there are mechanisms to do that. And they can also tie into the international commitment to make it even more believable. And on the international side, one is obviously trying to have a period which is not too short and not too long, to have it locked on for that period. And that's a very difficult choice, whether you should lock on for a short period or long period. But that's a debate, and it's right to the point that you're raising. How can you make this believable?
Richard?
On that specific comment?
Well, I was thinking that you've been talking about the conditions that were necessary for technological development, the input of an entrepreneurial edge, but how can you actually invest in anything if you don't trust the carbon price?
Well, that's one important issue is, of course, the market conditions that you create via carbon prices or other incentives. We did discuss that a bit in terms of when you look at the innovation chain for technology, it's important to design the technology pull so it's efficient, but also you have to recognize that you need the technology push, because if you cannot, a carbon market cannot stimulate development, research and development of new technologies. It's going to be a very expensive market if you're going to achieve that.